Hey guys, how you going? My name is Dom, and in today's video we're going to be having a look at creating a collapsible sidebar using HTML, CSS and a tiny bit of JavaScript. Okay, so this right here is the final product. Now as we can see, I've got this sidebar for navigation. Okay, so I've got a few icons here and of course the text. Now this is the part that's interesting. If I was to click here, we can see it now minimizes or collapses. So maybe minimize is the better terminology, I'm not too sure, but essentially we're going to be creating this right here. I think it's good for maybe more desktop focused apps that are still going to be supported on mobile, or if you want to just make more space on the page, or give your users the option to do so, this might be a good option. Okay, now also if I refresh this, we can see it's going to save the state of your previous collapse or view. So if I was to maximize it, refresh, it stays the same. If I was to minimize it, refresh, we can see it essentially just starts at obviously the minimized state. Okay, so it's quite easy to do. Let's go inside this tab right here and begin from scratch to of course create that collapsible sidebar. Okay, so inside the text editor for this page right here, it looks something like this. I've got this simple index.html file. Now, not too much going on here, aside from my inclusion of a main.css file inside the source directory, which looks like this currently. Of course, it is empty. Okay, now, one more thing, we're going to be using Google Material Icons for the icons in the sidebar, so make sure you head over to this page right here. I'll leave a link to this in the description, but essentially it's a icon library where you can pick and choose icons, and if you go to the developer guide, you should be able to just find under this section right here, you should be able to find a link right here to copy and paste. So copy this and paste it inside the head of your page. So now you can use the material icon library for your navigation bar. Okay, so the very first thing to do is going to be the HTML for the actual navigation. Okay, so inside the body, we're going to be essentially splitting up the page into two main sections. We have the navigation or the sidebar, and then on the right we have the actual main content. Okay, so let's make a new div inside here, calling this page-container. Okay, and now we can have two main elements within here, the navigation bar and of course the main content. So we can make a new nav element with a class of nav. Okay, leave this blank for now. Then down here we can make a new main element with a class of main. And also let's leave this blank. So now let's save this and head inside the CSS to actually style them correctly. So inside the main.css, we can firstly just define a few CSS variables. Okay, so we can use :root right here, and inside here we can specify the width of the actual icons. Okay, so right here we have a 50px width and height for these icons. So let's store these in a reusable manner by saying nav icon width equal to 50px, and we can specify one more for the actual width of this border right here, which is 8 pixels in this case. So we can just say nav border width and set this to be 8px just like that. So now of course we're going to be using these right here as we move on to make everything essentially just in one place. If I was to change this width, it is not going to break other areas or make it look funny. Okay, so now we can say HTML and body. We can target both these tags and we can basically just set them to be 100% height. We can say height 100% and a margin of 0. We can also specify a font family here of sans serif to make it look a bit better in the demonstration. Okay, so now we can target the page container. We can set this to be height of inherit. Okay, so basically just meaning 100% from the parent element right here. We can also display this as a flex because we want the navigation to be on the left side and the main content to be on the right side. So of course, Flexbox allows us to do that quite easily. Okay, so now we can target the main element and we can say height, once again, inherit 100%, and we can say padding and set this padding to be 0, and then we can just, you know what, we'll make it 0, then we can say padding left right here, then we can just say var and then nav border width. Of course, you can specify the padding left here by applying a few more values inside this property, but this to me looks a bit clearer. So basically, we want a bit of space on the left side of the main content. So basically right here, and I'll show you why, because if I have some content inside here, for example, let's add some content and just say, let's just say hi, for example. We want hi to appear essentially that 8 pixels from the left side. If we didn't have this padding, the hi will be hidden behind the border right here. So that's why we need to have that padding right there. Okay, cool. Anyway, let's go back inside here, and the last property for the main content is going to be overflow y. Set this to be auto. Now, if I didn't put this here, then as the content in the main section scrolls down past the page, it won't be scrollable. So by having this here, it's going to make it so we can actually scroll past the content. Okay, so let's demonstrate this, but first I just want to finish off the rule sets for the navigation bar. So let's target the nav, and for this we can say width and make this 200px, a height of inherit, okay, and a position of relative. This right here is going to come in handy a bit later on once we get to the actual right side clickable border. We can set a background color to be whatever we want. I'm going to be choosing a light gray, okay, and a transition of width at 0.2 seconds. That way we get a nice smooth transition on the width as we actually minimize or expand or collapse the actual sidebar. Okay. We can also say flex shrink 0 and make obviously make this 0. That way this width is never going to change as the window resizes or moves around. Let's now save this right here, okay, then refresh the browser and we get something like this. As we can see, as we can see, we've got the navigation bar on the left side here and the main right here. Now the main has got that bit of padding right there. If I was to edit as HTML, put some content inside here, we can see we get that nice gap, perfect for our for the border, which we're going to be adding a bit later on, but as we can see, it's working perfectly fine. Now let's talk about that scroll for a moment. So let's go back inside here and make a few paragraph tags of dummy text inside the main, something like this. Let's save this and then refresh, and we get this right here. Now, if I was to scroll down, we can see the nav bar is not moving. Okay, so this is how we're going to do it. We could potentially, you know, instead of doing this, we could potentially make this navigation bar always floating using the fixed position. However, you're not going to get the same effect where the content is going to essentially flow in and out as you collapse this. So that is why we are making our own sort of main content area with a scroll bar. Okay, cool. So now let's just get rid of all of this dummy text. It is no longer required, and we can move on. Okay, so the next step here is going to be just specifying a few styles or a single style for the navigation collapsed state. Okay, so let's make a new modifier class for the nav class. We can say nav dash dash collapsed, and essentially we can just say width and make this to be var, and then nav icon width. That way, when the navigation has this particular class, it is going to change its width to our icon width of 50px. Let's try this. Let's save it and then refresh. Go over to our navigation class. Let's say right here nav dash dash collapsed, just like this. Press enter and we can see it resizes down, and that is basically how it's going to work. We're going to be using JavaScript to, of course, add this class as required. So there you go. Okay, let's move on now to doing a few styles for the actual links themselves. So the links are going to look something like this in the navigation. Okay, so we're going to firstly just go inside here, and essentially every link is going to look like an anchor tag with a few, more elements, an icon, and a label. So we can say anchor just like this, and we can say nav __ link for the class name. We can put a hash for the href just for now, for testing purposes. Of course, right here, put your actual link. Now you may have noticed I'm using the block element modifier CSS naming convention as per usual, but you can of course name these classes whatever you like. Okay, so inside here, we're going to be specifying an icon container and then an actual label, so dashboard for example. Okay, so let's say div with a class of nav __ icon dash container. Inside here, we can insert a Google material icon. We can say I material dash icons, just like this, and we can say, for example, dashboard. Okay, we can then go down here and we can say span with a class of nav __ label and set this to be dashboard just like this. So right here, by putting material icons as the class and the dashboard inside here, we are essentially choosing the icon from this page with the name of dashboard, so this one right here. Let's now save this and then refresh, and we get something like this. Okay, so we can do the exact same thing for, let's just do 3 more links. So I'll just duplicate all of this stuff right here. In fact, you know what? I might actually just copy and paste from the actual example. So I'll copy that and paste it inside here. Let's refresh, and we get something like this. Okay, so now we can move on to actually using CSS to, of course, make these look like this. So back inside here, we can now target the nav __ link class, and for this we can say display, make this to be flex, and align items of center. This way we're going to have a perfect centering of the label and the actual icon. Okay, we can also say color and set this to be RGBA. Let's do 000 and then 0.75. That way we get a 75% opaque black, which will allow us to essentially just blend in with the actual navigation background right up here. Okay, we can also say text decoration, make this to be none to remove the default styling of the anchor tag. Let's save this and refresh, and we get something like this. Okay, so let's move on to doing a bit of a hover effect when you actually hover over the links. So back inside here, we can just get this class, and we can say :hover. On hover, we're going to say background color and set this to be just a bit of a darker shade of gray compared to the actual background of navigation bar. Let's save this and refresh, and we get something like this. Okay, cool. We can move on to doing the actual icon container and styling that up. So let's go back inside here, and we're going to be targeting the nav icon dash container class. And for this one, we can just simply say width and set this to be var, and then nav icon width to, of course, grab this one up here of 50, and do the same thing for the heights just right here. Okay. We can also say display, make this to be flex, and then align items of center, and a justify content of center, and a flex shrink of 0. So these 3 properties right here are going to horizontally and vertically center our icon. Okay, and this flex shrink is going to ensure, once again, similar to the usage of it up here, it is going to ensure that the icon container is not going to go less than 50px in width as the page flows around. Okay, let's save this and then refresh once again, and we get something like this. As we can see, we have perfect alignment in the center between the label and the icon container, and it's looking quite nice. Okay, so one more thing to fix here is going to be the label itself. So let's go back inside the HTML for a sec, and we can just copy dashboard and actually paste it a few more times. Let's save this and refresh, and we get something like this. So to essentially get around this problem where the height increases, you may want to shorten your actual link name or decrease the font size if you need to, but you can actually also go inside the CSS and you can simply just say for the nav label class, okay, so for the actual text itself here, we can simply just say white space, no wrap, and this should fix our problem. Let's save this and refresh, and now we get something like this. So it's not the best thing, but it's probably better than what we just saw. So that might be an option for you if you want, if you want to use it. Okay. Let's go back inside here and make this back to dashboard. Of course, the preferred option to solving that problem. And let's go back inside the CSS now and work on the actual border itself. So for this border right here, it's going to be an actual HTML element. Okay, so let's go inside the HTML right here. Actually, you know what? I missed one thing. Sorry. Let's go back inside the CSS, and we're going to be saying for the nav collapse class, we're going to be saying when the nav is collapsed, we're going to be targeting the nav label. Okay, and we're going to simply say display and make this none. That way, if I save this and refresh now, let's refresh this. Let's add the nav collapsed class here. Okay, hit this, and we can see right there for a split second the label text obviously disappears. So that's going to make it look a bit nicer and a bit smoother as far as the transition goes. Okay, so let's go back and work on the actual border. So inside the text editor, let's go inside the HTML and add a new element right up here for nav border. We can say .nav__border. It's going to be an empty div right here. Okay, so let's go in the CSS now, and of course style it to make it look like an actual border. So for this, we can just say nav__border. We're going to be saying position as absolute. This works with the nav position relative right here, which allows us to basically just say left 100%. And then top of 0. This way the border is going to be in the top right corner of the actual navigation sidebar. Okay, we can then say width and set this to be var. Then of course nav border width. Okay, and the height is going to be once again inherit. Okay, that way it takes up the whole page itself. Okay, we can also say background color and set this to be once again just the darkest shade of the gray used in the navigation bar, and we can say transition for background color at 0.2 seconds. Now you may want to actually make this a variable or something like that if you wish to, but personally I think it's fine. Okay, now one last thing here is going to be cursor. You want to set this to be EW resize, and this basically just gives you the actual nice resize looking cursor when hovering over the border. Okay, speaking of that, let's just copy this class right here and change the background color on hover. Okay, we can simply just say background color and set this to be once again an even darker version of this one right here. Okay, let's save this and then refresh, and we get something like this. Okay, now I want to just go back inside here and just put some HTML. So let's put dcode inside here, and we can see it is tight up against the border, which is what we actually want. If you don't get this, make sure you have set the padding correctly for your main right up here, your padding left. Okay, anyway, back inside here we can see the border is working perfectly fine as we may expect it to work. Okay, so that is basically all for the CSS for this sidebar. We can now move on to, of course, doing the JavaScript, which allows this to work. Now, I want to mention that technically you can probably get around actually using JavaScript for this. You could potentially make this a CSS only solution by using a hidden input field, or sorry, a hidden checkbox field, for example, using pseudo classes, something like that. but ultimately, JavaScript is probably going to be a lot cleaner and easier to, work with in the future. Also it lets us do the local storage as we it allows us to perform the refresh, keeping of state feature right here using local storage, which we're going to get to very shortly. So, JS is probably the easiest way to perform this. Okay, so anyway, let's go back inside the text editor and go down in the HTML right here. We're going to be applying a new script tag, and inside here, we're going to be sort of scoping this by a block. So we're going to be putting a block right here, and this just helps us separate our variables and constants, which we're going to define inside here from the global scope. That way, we're not polluting the global scope with variables and constants about navigation. Okay, so we can also put a comment right here that says navigation. Now, also, you may not have this problem if you're using a bundler or something like that. So it's just a universal solution to get around global pollution. Okay, so inside here, we can get a reference to both the navigation and the navigation border. So we can say const nav is equal to document.querySelector. We're going to be selecting here the .nav class. Okay, we can also select the border. So I can say nav border is equal to querySelector. We can say nav __ border. You may want to instead just replace this document with nav. That way you're only getting the nav border within this nav, up to you. And we can also specify two more constants right up here, and these are going to be for the actual CSS class of nav collapse. So of course this one right here, but also our local storage key, which we're going to be using to, of course, save that state of collapsed or open. So we can say right here, const collapsed class is equal to nav -- collapsed. Okay, and one more here for const ls or local storage key is equal to nav collapsed. Okay, we're going to be getting the basic functionality done first before moving to local storage. However, it is not too difficult to implement. Okay, so now we have all of these constants declared. We can go down here and we can say nav border.addEventListener. We're going to be listening for the click event. Okay, and we can say right here for the click event, quite simply, nav.classList.toggle and pass through here the collapsed class. Okay, so basically when the nav border gets clicked on, okay, we're going to simply just toggle the existence of the nav collapsed class. Very straightforward and easy to use. Obviously, if it doesn't exist, it's going to add it. If it does exist, it's going to be removing it. Okay, so now let's save this right here and then refresh, and we should get a working product. Let's click on this and we can see it gets toggled as we click on the border. Now when it comes to saving the state on refresh, like I said earlier, it's going to be done using local storage. So let's go back inside here, and we're going to be saying once we actually toggle the state of the sidebar, we can say local storage dot set item, and we can say right here ls key. Then we can say nav.classList.contains and pass through here our collapsed class. So basically, this is going to return true or false, whether or not the navigation bar is collapsed or not. Obviously, if it is collapsed, it's going to return true. If it's not collapsed, it's going to return false. So basically, this ls key, this local storage key of nav collapse, is going to be true or false. So we can then go up here and we can say if local storage.getItem at ls key is equal to true. So if the navigation or the sidebar is currently or was previously set to be collapsed, then we can simply say nav.classList.add and then pass through here collapsed class. So quite straightforward. We're going to be adding the collapsed class if you previously set it to be collapsed. Okay, and this works because of course up here we are defaulting to be not collapsed. So let's save this and then refresh, and we can see we get this right here. If I was to click on it, it expands. I'll refresh and of course it stays open. If I was to minimize it, refresh, it stays minimized. Okay, so that right there is how to create a collapsible sidebar / navigation using HTML, CSS, and a tiny bit of JavaScript. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.